Hey guys, so let's talk about how you can actually improve your app's retention and identify what's actually uh, driving your retention or sinking it, right? And this is a framework that I've used for multiple companies and try to identify what actually uh, helps drive retention, where we can make some impact, where we can make some changes, and actually see our retention improve, right? So the first thing and the foremost important thing is you can't actually improve retention unless until you have a very clear baseline, right? And let's take an example of day 30 retention. So let's say you want to identify your day 30 retention and work on that. So the first thing is, can you clearly identify what your day 30 retention is, right? And what's your definition of retention that you can rely on. And usually what I suggest is you start your retention from a user signing up and then only take something, the retaining event, right, or the event that users need to come back and do is something that's actually meaningful for them to actually get value out of the product, right? So a lot of companies define retention as a user just coming back to the app, right? I don't think that's the best way to define retention. Ideally, you would want to define retention as someone coming back and doing some action through which they get value out of the product, right? Because that's what's actually valuable. So let's say, and I've taken a very, good example of retention here. I mean, if you are at 50% at day 30, I think you're doing a great job. But let's just say that our day 30 retention is at 50%, right? So this is our baseline, which means that half of our people who sign up are still active by day 30 or after that, right? Now, what we really want to understand is, are there slices of data or cohorts of certain users that actually convert at, let's say, way higher than 50%, and some that convert at way lower than 50%? And that's what we really need to figure out. So, how we're going to do it is there are two ways to do this, right? So, the first is, let's say, demographic cuts, right? And demographic cuts, or think about it in a way that these are who our users are, right? Where do they come from? What country they come from? What's their age? Maybe they answer something during onboarding, any of these bunch of things, right? So let's look at this data, right? So I've taken some sample data. So when we break down retention by, let's say, country, we see, oh, US is at 65%, UK is at 50%, Canada is at 35%. Okay, that's nice. When you look at acquisition channel, you'll see, oh, referrals at 72%, paid social is really low at 31%, right? Maybe you look at it with respect to what plan they bought, right? You can look at it through n number of things, and then you can also combine. So you can also look at, okay, if US is doing really well, is US paid social doing above 50%, or is it still below 50%, right? So you can sort of combine a lot of these different factors and come up with like very definitive cohorts that you know are doing really good in retention and not. And that itself is a great start, right, for you to identify, oh, okay, why is this cohort doing well? It's important for you to ask yourself that question, and why are some not doing that well, right? But this gives you a very clear indicator of where you would ideally want to focus, right? And this is the easy part out, right? The second part is actually the tougher part out, which is, uh, you've looked at demographic data, but now the second part is you actually want to go ahead and look at what are people doing in the app, right, after signing up, that's maybe getting them to a good retention or a bad retention at day 30 or after day 30, right? And now why is that tough is because if you're a pre PMF product or you are a post PMF product, you could have like 100 different behaviors, right? Because user behavior is very, very complex and random. And so before you even open the data there, what you really need to do is maybe come up with 10 hypotheses that you think can affect retention in any way, right? Either negatively or positively. And so here are some that I've noted down. These are very generic, and so maybe you can take a few ideas from that. But obviously, for your own product, your own website, your own business, it can look very, very different, right? So we'll go through some of them. So for example, one of them is maybe people who return more than 2 times in the first 7 days, they actually retain much better at day 30, right? Or maybe people who invite a teammate in week one retain better. People who complete all onboarding steps and do not skip any retain better, right? People hit their first aha event within 24 hours retain better than people who do it after 24 hours or who don't do it at all, right? And so you can, come up with multiple hypotheses. I'd recommend maybe keeping it at 10 and not going to maybe 20 or 30, because every product can have those core 10 hypotheses, and this is where you also need to spend a lot of time to really think what can actually impact my retention, right? Now, the next is you'll do a very similar thing that we did with demographic factors, that you're going to split it, right? So you're going to split by, let's say, people who used core feature within 7 days, right, or came back more than 2 times within 7 days. That's your cohort, and then everyone else, and you plot that retention. And if you see this different, which means, oh, okay, people who did that cohort, they retain at 72%, people who didn't retain at 38%, right? Or you'll go for, and you look at it across different factors, right? So maybe people who invited a member, it's 81%, and everyone else is maybe at 44%, right? Or you could have multi-session, 76 and 28%. So these are a few examples of how you would want to look at that chart over all of these different hypotheses that you have. Now, one thing that I do want to mention here, and I think by now it's clear. So once you've identified the factors here, you've identified the demographic factors, then you can again combine those and come up with like a plan that, okay, these are like our 5 top converting cohorts of users, and these are our 5 worst converting cohorts of users. Now, what can we do to actually get more users into the top 5 converting cohorts and lesser into the least converting ones, right? And so that's when you would do a bit of experiments and all of that, which I'll come to in a moment. But before that, there's one really important thing that all of you should know, and that is you always should time box the behavior or your hypothesis, right? Or the conclusion is wrong. So think about it this way, right? So if I just have a hypothesis that, okay, if people use feature X, do they retain better? You'll see something like this, right? Maybe a modest delta, or you might not even see a delta, right? But if you have something like used feature X within X days of sign up, you'll see a better delta. That's usually how it works. And the reason for that is because now you have a very definite behavior to even impact. So even if you want to make changes on or push users to use a feature within 7 days of sign up, that's much more concrete for the product team or for you to think on how to do it, compared to just saying that, oh, how do we push more users to do feature X, right, anytime after sign up. And the reason for this is also that think about it this way, right? A user that's using that feature within, let's say, the first week or within the first day of sign up is actually behaviorally very, very different from someone that uses it on the 25th day. And if you don't time box it, you're saying that both of those users are the same. But if you time box it, you can very easily differentiate both of those users. And so it's very important to time box it. If you don't, you're going to struggle, right? Now, once you've done all of this, once you've combined demographics and behavioral patterns and try to come up with, okay, these are our cohorts of, and this is what's happening, the next thing is for you to now sit down and think on, okay, what can we really do to maybe, what experiments can be done, can be done by us, maybe some product changes, UI changes, UX changes, some new small features. What can we really do? Ship them, run that experiment, ship that change, monitor baseline, and keep repeating, right? And that's usually how you can improve retention. And also let me be very candid here. You're not going to see the impact in a month, right? Retention, or for that matter any conversion metric, you're not going to see that impact really quickly. You'll actually have to do a bunch of tests and experiments to get to that stage. And yeah, I hope this was helpful. In case you guys have any questions, feel free to comment, feel free to reach out to me, book a call,